Tacitus Today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. Please listen to this presentation as you would a radio broadcast. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the blatant, brazen, coordinated artificial pumping of property and real estate prices all across the Western world. Now, we shouldn't be surprised about this because the transfer of wealth away from productive activity in the Western economies to property and insurance and those sorts of things, finance that the globalists can fully control and where they can move money around and pretty much do what they want when they want. And also considering the political class where that used to derive their income from their parliamentary salaries and so on, they now derive more than half their income from property speculation, or if they're at the very apex of the political power grid, then also insider trading is massive for profiteering. So now, because of that, the political class is in support of this. Now, when we look at across the West, in support of this. Now, when we look at across the Western world, the standard of living of any citizen, whether you're looking at citizens in Australia or, again, the first world, Australia or Canada, the United States, Britain, and so on, the standard of living has fallen off a cliff. It's incredible rather how dramatic the decline in standard of living has been. Well, where does this decline come from? The primary source of standard of living decline is the cost of real estate, the cost of rent. To give you an example, I'm looking at a suburb here in Sydney, and a small compact two-bedroom apartment, not modern, that hasn't been recently remodeled or refurbed, so it's got 20-year-old type fixtures and fittings in it or older. That would rent 5 years ago. That would rent for about $400 to $425 a week. It's kind of a shabby apartment, compact, small two-bedroom. Now, that same apartment today rents for $900. So in just 5 years, the rent has doubled or slightly more than doubled. Now, incomes and salaries haven't doubled or gone up by more than a few percent in reality. So that's a huge bite out. And so really say just an average wage earner would have to find another approximately $20,000 a year just to rent that same apartment from what it was 5 years ago. So that's how much the rent's been hiking and how quickly it's been going up. So when you've suddenly got to find $20,000 a year more to put a roof over your head than you did 5 years ago, your standard of living and quality of life is going to decline and diminish. Now, this has obviously been happening. It's in everyone's face. The political class has known about it. Yet somehow nothing was done. There's just a shoulder shrug and just move on. Who cares? And so on. So it's amazing that something as monumental and in your face as this could just be brushed aside and shrugged off as easily as it has been. But it even gets worse. Off as easily as it has been. But it even gets worse. If you were looking at, say, say an electricity bill, I use round numbers here, but say an electricity bill each quarter of $1,000. I mean, we're looking at over $2,000 now. In some cases, depending on where you are, the cost of electricity is now 3 times more. So in order to rent that two-bedroom apartment, you've got to find another $20,000 just to pay the electricity. You're looking at having to find around another $5,000. Then let's go to food. And now if we look at the basics of the food sort of staple, milk and bread, that sort of stuff, that's gone up, around 35 to 40%. And that's entry level. If you want to have something a bit special, then you're looking at well over that, looking at more than double there. Also, the basics like butter, for example, that's way more expensive. That's well more than double in the case of butter. Cream the same. Cream that you could buy for $2 5 years ago is now $5, that sort of thing. So, and the same goes for most cuts of meat. Probably chicken is the only meat that was cheaper at the time and is still on a relative basis cheap, even though that's gone up by 50%. Eggs have more than doubled in price and so on. Now, where have all these price rises come from? I mean, who knows? But there's no justification for it to claim that it's higher cost of labour is bullshit, because if you look at the cost of labour involved in the production of these things, it's not a large component. If you look at, say, well, it's the cost of fuel. Well, again, fuel is quite a small component of this overall. Now, there is some sort of argument in the cost of, say, fertilizers, things like that. They've gone up, and I do agree with that. But if you factor in all of those things, it still doesn't represent the price rise. And so what we've seen isn't that there's been increased production costs. What it is increasingly in these areas, it's controlled by cartels that are engaging in monopoly and cartel price rigging and fixing, while the government just looks the other way. That's what's happened, I believe. Now, coming back to the real estate thing here, or the rental prices, why are the prices allowed? Well, the banks and the big finance institutions are all in on this. They love this sort of stuff. And they're able to insider trade, as indeed are the politicians. And something I've mentioned many times before, the bank, a big financial institution can steer a politician they want to control, or they want to be under their influence, and steer them into buying a property, and it'll be interest-free loan. There'll be some sort of bullshit thing where the politician doesn't have to pay any money back. The bank, the financial institution, effectively becomes a co-investor in the scam, and so the politician buys the property that the bank shoehorned them into. Maybe they refurb it or remodel it or something like that, and then the bank will arrange a rich, cashed-up, money laundering Chinese or whatever investor to come along and buy that property for several times the market value. So the politician, the bank gets their money back, they're not exposed, but the politician then makes a windfall profit of a couple of $1 million, a few $1 million, and they do that a few times, and they've made $10 million. And for someone that's living in the middle range, even if it's the upper end of the middle range, $10 million landing in your pocket, that's life-changing. And so they're able to live and retire a life of luxury, relative luxury at least, and never have to worry about money again. They've got a nice parliamentary pension and so on. And while they're there, they just do what they're told. So there's no one in the power structure and the finance structure has any incentive, absolutely none, to prevent, slow down, or stop the price rises. Now, I'll contrast this with there was a bit of a price bubble occurred in the early 1980s. And if you look at the political class in Australia at the time, that didn't derive their primary income from real estate, so they were quite independent, if you like, in their view, but they were concerned about their fellow citizens. And the sort of memorandum and letters and the parliamentary talk that the debates that were going on, that it was considered as terrible. It would reduce the standard of living of Australians, that they'd have to meet cost, and they'd have to stop having families or have smaller families because of the high, this, that, and the next thing. They'd have to work 2 jobs to pay for it. And this was viewed as a national calamity or emergency. And the difference in attitude then to now is quite stark. Today, the political class, maybe they'll give a little bit of lip service, but they cheer it on again because they're now co-investors in the globalist economy, and that globalist economy is a fake economy and is involved in transferring wealth. So there's no way that the price of real estate is a reflection of anything organic or natural or market forces. It's not. That there is no market forces driving this. It's pumped and prearranged and organized through conspiracy of the political class, the financial class, and then the globalist executive class, if I can use that term. So what are the sort of tools and devices and structures that they use? Well, pretty much every lending institution, particularly if it's investment property, investment type rather than someone buying a house to live in. There is pretty much a requirement that the whoever borrows the money has to follow or has to subscribe to various information providers that say how much should you be renting your property for, how much can you get for that property. And a lot of these people are, who borrow money to buy, or institutions or whatever, it doesn't really matter. But they use this as a supposed guide. So no matter what price is being paid for a property, say for rent, for example, the advisory guide of what can you get for the property always runs $100 to $150 a week ahead of whatever is being paid. Now it's designed, in my view, designed to deceive, not to guide or to inform. Now it's designed, in my view, designed to deceive, not to guide or to inform, or it's theirs for the sole purpose of pumping up the real estate. Again, no matter what price the rent that someone's paying, whether it's doubled or tripled in the last 5 minutes, that you go onto these advisory websites and they always say the rent you can get can be more, $100 to $150 a week more. Always it's ahead, never less. So this is clearly, and if you go to any other website, they're all saying the same. They're completely, the entire property advisory industry is geared to pumping the price. Now, this gives a lot of legal cover for, because people that are getting screwed on rent may decide they're going to take the property owner to court, for example, and that happens. And so the property owner's got to, well, it's not me, Your Honor. I didn't do it. It wasn't me. It was that website. They said so. They said it was okay. It's like the website, the feminist websites that say all women are being raped 1,000 times a day. Well, it wasn't us. We didn't say it. They said it. We're only going on what they said. And politicians do that as well. They pretend it was, the experts told us, it wasn't us. And so this gives them a lot of legal cover for doing this. Now, there's no attempt to break any of this, shameful, grotesque scam. There's no attempt to break it up or even to expose it for what it is. Now, if you go to any globalist controlled media, so they may concede that rents are running out of control. They may concede that there's people living 20 to a 2-bedroom apartment, which some of them do, and recently they've been doing that. But they don't explain why or how or anything. They only say, well, build more houses and then give more social welfare to people who can't afford it. That's all. That's why are these rents? I mean, that's astonishing. Rents have more than doubled in 5 years, and you don't even mention it in your article as to why or how that's happening. Now, how it's happening, there's a variety of reasons, but the reasons are fairly narrow. There are overseas buyers are permitted to come in and buy up vast swathes of Australian residential real estate. I don't mind so much they buy up office real estate. That's a little bit different because the more the money you pay on the rent for an office real estate. Office real estate is tax deductible from your business income, but private owners can't write that off. So overseas buyers are permitted to, and they do. I've seen it firsthand, and there are Chinese buyers that own, vast tracts of residential property in Australia, and they also use nominees, local nominees through family networks and cousins and goodness knows what to buy again to own. So you get an illiterate Chinese peasant cleaner that's got a $10 million real estate portfolio, these sorts of things. And again, the government doesn't clamp down on this, which they easily could if they wanted to. Where a $30,000 a year cleaner, where do you get the money to buy this sort of real estate? How did you find? My cousin in China loaned me the money. Oh yeah, sure they did, and really go through. So that should be stopped. There should be no overseas ownership or nominee, local ownership for overseas investors, all that shit. The Brahmins are the same. Some of the Brahmins in India are very rich. And again, they buy vast swathes of property as well. as to a lot of the rich Middle Eastern folks and so on. So the Australian real estate's become a bit of a playground. Then on top of that, you've got the the BlackRocks and those sort of guys, again, using all sorts of nominee and front company and others to go and buy property. And then superannuation firms or retirement saving firms also being players in the market as well. And all of those places be highly politicized and under the control of, again, the BlackRocks and those sorts of organizations anyway. So you get all these players. Now, there was a time when residential real estate was bought by people who wanted the house to live in, and at that time, residential real estate in Australia was very affordable. Again, somebody working in a factory could afford to buy a house and have a wife and 2.4 children, this sort of thing, but that sort of architecture of ownership and so on has changed. The amount of people who are buying property purely as an investment to flip and not to own or has mean that there's vast sums of money have moved into real estate. So you're looking at a house without any improvements, without any additions or upgrades, a house that was worth $25,000 in 1975 could sell for $5 million today in Sydney. And there's been so if you look at say close to resources, as in good public transport links, good shopping centres, that there's the rents have gone up higher there than say elsewhere, but there's not much in it. Maybe it's gone up 125%, just a little more than double, but it's still got 95% in other areas that don't have such good links. So it's not like there's a stark difference. Something else too that I noticed in doing some research for this vid was the areas of Sydney that have had the most hysterical increase in high-rise buildings and apartments. Thousands upon thousands of new apartments and so on have gone up. In those areas where there's been a massive increase in supply, they've had the biggest increase in rent increases have been the biggest in those same areas where supply has increased out of sight. This idea that if we just increase the supply, then there won't be a problem, that's crap. I'm convinced that if the supply was, every time the supply has increased, the globalist controlled Western government just increased the immigration intake. Now there's a second element to this where there's beginning just over the last few months that the major globalist news networks have been conceding that because of the high rents, people are having to go into a communal share accommodation type arrangements. They tend to focus on the black lesbian single mother or something. They tend to try and put it as a pathos story of those at the bottom of the social power stack, but that's not the issue here. They're avoiding the material point in this. Why, when the supply of property is increasing more than it ever has, why is it that rents are increasing at a much faster rate? And the point with this is that there's an internationally coordinated scam going on here. If I look at the way where rents have increased, you look at a middle distance suburb in London, a middle distance suburb in Toronto, a middle distance suburb in Sydney, a middle distance suburb in Melbourne, and so on. You look at all of those and say, okay, over the last 5 years, what did the rent? And they've increased almost exactly the same percentage across all different cities in different countries, in different places, different demographics. The whole thing, they've increased by almost exactly the same amount. Now, and if you look again on the advisory websites, they do the same thing. The rent's always ahead of whatever is being paid. So this is clearly an internationally coordinated scam. Quite clearly, I mean, it's not a matter for debate. Quite clearly, an international coordinated scam. And so the big financial institutions use mass migration as the cover story, and it is a contributing factor. There's no question of that. But also international buyers and the other things that I mentioned. But I just want to highlight how much of a coordinated scam it is. So since the globalists have taken control in the Western world, our standard of living as first world Western citizens has absolutely been torn to pieces, and they've done it all, while at the same time they accuse everyone else of being a Nazi or a fascist. I mean, the height of it. You've been with Tassos today at your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.